most of the stuff goes on. It feels like that's kind of the place to be.
That is very true. For those of you who cruise right regular, that's quite an interesting observation for someone who had no idea. Yeah, the laundrettes are quite a hub on regular cruising. So do you just happen to stumble across one and find out there's people in there laundering? I know you said, would they be crew? I said, no, they would be passengers. They can do their own laundry. We just touched base on it a little bit. You went, oh, right, okay. And this afternoon, I heard this, and I heard this, and I heard that's like a laundrette on a cruise ship, but that is not just unique to here, but it is a good observation. Whatever is said in a laundrette is true, apparently.
Stays in a laundrette.
It stays in a laundrette, apparently. There are things that obviously we would like to talk about today, and we'd all like to know. If I could touch on that first, that we can't talk about lottery numbers, how you do things, because there is a present embargo owing to press coverage. There are journalists travelling as well, and there are things yet still to be seen.
Yes.
And present production still yet to go out. So.
Yeah, there is, unfortunately, because we're in the middle of this. One goes out tonight, the one that isn't live, obviously. Otherwise, oh, shit! So yes, because they're going out at the moment, I've never done any interviews or anything on the events. That's part of basically Channel 4 are doing all the promotion for it, and one of the big things is that I don't do any press. And because there are a few journalists in tonight, it does mean that because of that I can't take any questions on the events or the lottery.
Yes.
So keep those to yourself.
Yes. So if there are any journalists,
find me after a few drinks at the Crow Desk. I'll tell you everything you want.
If there are any journalists present, if you just leave now, and we'd like to help them. Not at all. So that's the reason. So we could state that while we open up the floor a little bit. So we can't do that. But let's find out a little bit more about you. For me, describing what you do, I have to think. He's Derren Brown. How would you sum up in a word? This is what I do. Because it's a magician, trick, illusion, mentalist, which is a word that...
I was asked for a term for it years ago, and I said psychological illusionist, which is difficult enough to say when you're sober. So that doesn't really mean anything. I started off as a hypnotist, and then when I was at university, I saw a hypnosis show and just came away thinking I'm going to learn how to do that. And then I sort of got into doing close-up magic and sleight of hand and that kind of things. I guess it's difficult to earn a living being a hypnotist, particularly if you're performing without doing embarrassing things and making people take their clothes off and all that kind of stuff. I knew I didn't want to go that route. So I started doing close-up magic, and then I was doing the hypnosis and doing shows with it, and kind of started to think, well, I can go the therapeutic route with the hypnosis, and then gradually the two kind of came together. I sort of merged them into something that was partly psychological and suggestion-based, and partly kind of sort of more conjuring-based, and that sort of became my thing and what I enjoyed. And I wasn't the only person in the world doing it, but there were a few of us. But then as the TV stuff then happened, then I thought I'll just do that now. It's easy for me to just do that, put that to my name, and then sort of look back. So that's sort of how it came together. That's one of the journalists now at the back.
That's not the baby that you think it's somebody's going to actually stop. Maybe this is going to be different. So quite an interesting start. There was no real sort of, it came about. There is no real sort of, so you can't be pigeonholed, which I think is great for you. You're Derren Brown. What's he going to do next? Is what my sister said on the telephone yesterday. Who's on the cruise? And I told her all about you, and yes, she said, ask what you do next. And I thought that was quite an interesting. That's Derren Brown. What's he going to do for us next?
That's nice. There's a thing with magicians that I've always felt, which is I was very aware of it as a danger that you. Part of the love of doing any form of magic is that all the things that you really enjoy about it, they're very difficult to really sort of talk about when you're doing interviews and things, because they're always the half of it you have to kind of really keep to yourself, how you're doing it, how all the methods are and so on. And because of that, what you tend to do as a magician is to then sort of develop a kind of a pretend persona that is supposed to be interesting enough to keep people hooked. You can't talk about the stuff that for you is really interesting. So what magicians then tend to do is sort of become, I feel, sort of quite sort of two-dimensional creatures that then are fascinating for a bit, But then very quickly, I think, it becomes a little bit insulting because you know, however much you enjoy what they do, you know that it's, there's a trick to it, there's a technique, and if they don't seem to be letting you in on that, then it can just start to feel a bit like, all right, come on, and what tends to happen is the magicians are very popular and loved for a couple of years, and they start to become figures of fun, or people that you love to hate, and I was very aware of that going into magic, and I may have, that may be exactly what's happened to me, but one thing I have tried to do is just to keep it fresh and different, and each couple of years try to come up with something that isn't like the previous thing. So now at the event, they're much more performance-based, much more about sort of just tricks and things, because the previous things, Trick or Treat, was sort of, they were like mini dramas that it was about somebody else. It wasn't really about me, it was about somebody else who was going through something. So just trying to keep it a bit fresh is lovely. So that's very nice of your sister to say.
Yes,
it's your sister?
Yeah, my sister.
She sounds like her.
Yeah, she is. I have to say that. I own my sister. On the production side of things, often with the sort of similar line of work that you're in for others, there's often a huge creative team. Sort of obviously with all the television things that you do you have your own immediate circle of obviously trusted confidants that assist you with that, or are they also part of what you do? Or is it just very much it's Derren Brown and they are created for you, or are they part of your whole process in what you do?
Actually, I didn't hear a word of what you said. I was just looking at that weird creepy shadow. Oh, it's your shadow! I was just wondering what that is. I think it's somebody stood in front of the camera. Yes. I thought it was just an ominous shape moving over your head. It's gone now. It's gone now.
What shape?
There is a small circle, I suppose almost a dot, of people that I do work with. Andy Nyman, some of you, if you know my stuff well, will know him. He's an actor, but he did the same stuff that I am, and we started working on the shows from day one, which was 1999. The first show went in 2000. It's a Channel 4 show, if you don't know. So we've been working together for about 10 years. He sees more of me than he does his wife. And the two of us largely have been responsible for the thrust of the shows and the ideas and the writing of them. More recently, there's a third member of our team which has joined us, who is called Ian, who's around somewhere. And those of you who come and see the shows, you'll see him about. There's sort of a couple of guys I'm on board with. Is the one with the shorter hair. So Ian now writes quite closely. So because Andy is now acting a lot and he's off acting, so I need somebody else. But it's always been very. I think it's important you don't write on your own. If you're on your own, you can very quickly become quite self-indulgent, which I think is another problem with magic and magicians that very quickly happens. So having somebody else to write with, you keep challenging each other. Andy and I are very different people, and that makes for quite a good writing team. We get on very well, we're very good friends, but equally we have different interests and things pull in different ways. So that's always been very helpful. And so it's a very small team. Then other people as well with the production end up. Ideas come from. Somebody says, "Oh, what about this?" and you end up taking that on board as well. But,
when you're out on the street doing things out in public, how much sort of notice do you give people that you're going to be doing something in the street, or you just rock up anywhere with the camera crew and your circle of creative team and just get on with it, or is it very much not sort of set up but stage managed ahead of the time, or are you quite happy just?
It's actually been a very long time since I've done that. I think when I used to do it, back when the shows first started to come out, there was quite a bit of street, wasn't even very much. I think there was a very conscious thing, because David Blaine had done his shows that were very street-based and really changed the way that magic is seen and shown on television. If any of you don't know, David Blaine is a very famous American magician, but what he did at the time was he changed the way magic was filmed. And previous to him, it's a guy at a table like this, like Paul Daniels or David Nixon before him, doing a trick, and the camera's very much sort of fixed on them. You're seeing everything, but it's very kind of light entertainment and very sort of quite static, and you see the trick, and maybe an audience applauds. And what was interesting with Blaine was that the first thing is, he's out on the street, it's filmed like a documentary, the camera's all over the place. So, ironically, what you're seeing is actually less fair than what you see in a studio, but you believe it much more, you're much more on side with it because it feels much more like real life. So that made a big difference, but secondly, the big change was focusing on the experience of the people taking part, because that's what it is, that's where magic takes part. It's not in how the magician is doing what he's doing, it's not in whether he's Is he just using just a marked deck, all the cards are the same, or is he using some very clever, complicated sleight of hand? Irrespective of that, it just happens in the mind of the person watching, whether if they experience that thing as magical, then it's magic. That's all it is. It's like the comedian telling a joke. If it doesn't matter how much work he puts into the joke, if you don't laugh, it's not funny, and he has to abandon it. So similarly, with what Blaine really focused on was putting the focus on people reacting to it. And large part, you watch the show for people screaming and running off and swearing, that's what it became about. So although we were very careful with our show, not I say we, as in me and the team originally, not to copy that, it was very much a post-Blaine show. So you do have vox pops, as they call it, people going, oh, that was amazing, I didn't know how that happened. And that became part of what that was. So, that was a long way of saying, didn't do a lot of street stuff because Blaine had become very known for that. At the time it was easy, now it's more difficult because, well, it's easier to get a crowd going because people, now they know who I am, so people do tend to gather as before. It was difficult, excruciating if you like me, and really hate that kind of, gather round, it's horrible. I hate that. I'm actually not exactly shy, but I hate that kind of thrusting myself out in that way, horrible. So now, luckily, thank God, if I do have to do it up the street, I don't have to do that because people come over and look, and then it's a lot easier.
What you asked on David Blaine, which
yes.
I was going to actually ask you about him in particular. And you did kind of touch on it just briefly there. David Blaine and magician, you can pretty quickly hack people off basically. If you're popular for a while, you have to move on. You sort of, don't know me now. We know it's done. But he hacks a lot of people off. He can create your reaction. All that thing, was it over the Thames when he was in the glass case and thing? There's things like that because it's your line of work. But can you step aside and go, that's really getting on my nerves now, because that's representing part of your working industry. Can it ever sort of go against you? What's sort of
No, I don't think so. I think he's just chosen a different route. I think, like, any of the things that I was talking about this in the show the other day, choices that you make in your 20s, we've all done it. I'm sort of, I do it now. I'm in my mid-30s. The choices you make in your 20s about your career come from one place, and then by the time you're kind of maybe in your mid-30s, you start to think, is this really the right thing? Maybe I'll jack it all in. I'll become self-employed. I'll do this. I'll do that. And I guess if you're known for being so with me, I was choosing to be a magician in my 20s, now I'm in my mid-30s, and the reasons why I chose to do it back then, to sort of impress people, or so on, or hypnosis to feelings of control, or impressing people, those reasons why you get into it in your 20s, they're no longer appropriate for me now. So now, I kind of like doing other things with it, but it's not about look at me, it's more about look at these people, or, as going back to that trick or treat thing. Being able to try and do something new with it. I think that's all Blaine's doing, is just, he presumably got a bit bored of or grew out of doing that, so then admitted they're more sort of self-aggrandising because they're big endurance stunts, but he's found something else. And I went down to see him up in the box in Tower Bridge, and actually it really felt quite special. I mean, 5 minutes, you sort of, you leave, you do something else, but it did feel like, well, this is a lovely bit of history, I remember this, but, we're Brits, and we don't take well to people taking themselves very seriously, which is, maybe if there was a problem, that was it. But I think
it just causes a nice reaction in a way. It's a reaction. And publicity is good publicity, as they say, and there's no such thing as bad publicity. So it doesn't reflect always on other people doing something similar or some kind of work. Something I wasn't aware of was this book that I have here. When we talk about coming on and everything, this really caught me by surprise.
So the portraits.
Yeah, and also not because it's a book,
which it definitely is.
It definitely is a book.
I like books. Curious.
I like books like this because it's lots of pictures. I wasn't aware that this was another side to you, or indeed if that's the right expression. But it's also caused a lot of our passengers and customers at this time when they see the book. I didn't know he did this. And it is rather, I might say, not because you're sitting here, it's very impressive. I don't know if you've bought it or know about it, but these are quite astounding. The one of the Queen,
they're very good, aren't they?
The one of the Queen, there's one of the Queen in here, in the bath. No. And there's one of the Queen and a letter back from Clarence Harris saying, I think the chosen words was, I'm to ask to thank you or something.
Yeah.
But how did all that come about? How did that creativity come about? Because this is not something that you would just pick up naturally, surely.
So it's a book of portraits, a book of, if any of you want what talking about. It's a book of caricature portraits, and I've been sort of drawing since I was little, and then around the time I was at university I started taking it a bit more seriously, and it's 10 years worth of stuff there, so some of them are ropier than others.
Are there any in here that I could point out, and maybe we get the camera to look at, just to share some of this with you? I particularly like Anthony Hopkins, because he's quite unusual anyway. He doesn't need much work, but clearly, I don't mean to mock you on with it, he's got an odd look about him. Do you choose people because they've got a certain look, or all these people mean something to you?
I think they're just people that I'll find interesting at any one time, and kind of, because, you know, it's a lot of work, sort of, you put a lot of love into them, and you've got to find that person interesting to want to paint them. So
I'm just wondering if our camera could, well, there's some idea of it, we can zoom in a little bit more, I don't know if we can, but that's the sort of thing we're looking at there, and that's, there we go, you can see on the screen, it's Anthony Hopkins. I don't know who's next, but is it Woody Allen? Yes? Yeah, Woody Allen. But these really are great works of art. But the one of the Queen, I find it. The one of the Queen, you can't wait for this. I think it's towards the back. Maybe you know your book better than I do, but there's Jack Lemmon, there's someone else, James Marsden, Glenn Close. If she said it's Friday when you see that one. But so, you know, these are still available. I'll flip through and find the Queen.
it's right at the back.
It is. Eddie Izzard is in there. I mean, Matt Damon.
You're watching a man flicking through a book.
Is that what you're paying for? Am I getting near? John Malkovich. They're strong characters. I don't know whether that was on purpose or not. So, Sean, I think
right at the back.
Right, this one right at the back.
I should forward one. Forward one.
There it is. There it is. I'm going to say this right. Thank you very much. My book reading skills are not what they used to be. There's the Queen. In the mind of Derren Brown's guys. That's the Queen on the letter back from Clarence House. And I need to thank you from the lady in waiting. But that's just, it's a fascinating book, and it really has opened up a whole different side to maybe what's the man behind the works. How did it all come about then? I mean, is this something you did initially as a hobby? Or
yes, yeah. It's about 10 years of painting in there. Some of them are fairly ropey compared to others. There's a lot of, they vary a lot. But I needed 70 to put in there, so I had to dig out some of the ones.
Any plans to do more of this?
I'd love to, but of course, because I get about a week off a year. I don't get a lot of time for myself. So because of that, if I do paint, it's kind of occasional weekends. So while it was easy enough to put together enough for a book now, a second book might take another 10 years if I'm only on occasional weekends again. So yes, no, it's something I love doing and something I will continue to do. But might not be another one for a while. So buy it now. That's the rest. I think
it kind of comes away with. So it kind of comes across like that when you're going through it. It's really pleasurable to turn the page. I mean, I've been through it several times now. I didn't find the Queen that quick last time, but it comes across as this is just what I've done. If you want it, enjoy it like me. It's
I think also, I don't know about you, but when I'm looking to buy a book, I always take the price of the book and then I divide that by the number of pages in the book to see what sort of value for money I'm getting. And I think that represents good value, if nothing else.
It's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Something I found out about you, you're the patron of the, let me get it right, National Parrot Society.
The patron
saint of
the National Parrot Sanctuary.
Sanctuary, that's it.
Which is in Skeggy, if any of you know it. One person knows it. Up in Skegness, and it's a place for sick parrots that go. And I had parrots of my own, and eventually gave them on to. It's a fantastic place. If you're ever up around Lincolnshire, around Skegness, it's amazing. It's acres and acres and acres of these parrots. And I was there. I always pop in when I go on tour. We were up there last year, and forgive me the journalists that are in here, because I was talking about this earlier on, because I love it. And there's a whole generation, because parrots live for so long, and Churchill's parrot died about 10, 15 years ago, they live often to 100. So these birds tend to be given away by their owners at some point, because they outlive their owners. So there's like a whole generation of birds there that sort of all lived through the war and so on. And there was stories that Steve, who owns it, tells. He came out one night, and one of them had set off, because if they hear a noise that reminds them of something, they'll sort of start triggering off all the noises that it reminds them of. So one of them had heard some noise which reminded him of something he had heard in the Blitz, and it started just, because they're all stored, all these noises that they've heard are stored, it started doing blitz noises and the bombs falling. And then all the other parrots in the sanctuary that had lived through that same generation all joined in. So Steve walks out in the middle of the night to hear what sounds like bombs falling. It was astonishing, even though they probably never made that noise. They probably never even made it during the war, but it just sort of heard it, stored it away, and that one thing triggered it off. That and the other thing he said that he goes to people's houses, sometimes if they want to get rid of a parrot, he has to sort of just make sure that, why they want to get rid of it. They're not going to suddenly change their mind and want it back, which can be very stressful for the animal. So he goes to this elderly couple's house just to sort of sound them out and meet the parrot. There's an African grey, they're very, very bright, intelligent birds that talk they've got the best talking ability of all of the birds and sound very, very realistic, very human when they want to. But anyway, so he goes and meets this couple, and the bird had sort of been put away in a side room, and he's talking to the wife, Rose, who's in the kitchen making a cup of tea for Bill, the husband, who's in the front room, and the bird's sort of in a separate room. And he says to Rose, why do you want to get rid of the bird? She says, well, I'd be all right with it, but to be honest, I don't think Bill can look after it anymore. I think it's a little bit sad, but I think he's sort of started to lose it over the last couple of weeks. It's a bit sad, but I'm making him a cup of tea. This is the 8th cup of tea that he's asked for in the last 20 minutes. I think he's just starting to sort of, it's been going the last few weeks, so it's a little bit sad. Oh, okay, that's fair enough. So he goes in and talks to Bill and says, why do you want to get rid of the parrot? He says, well, it'd be fine if it was just me, but to be honest, I think Rose is, I think she's starting to lose it. And as he's talking, Rose comes in with a cup of tea and puts it down. And he says, oh, thanks, Rose, thank you. I said, oh, bless her, that's the 8th cup of tea she's brought in for me in the last 20 minutes. I think she's starting to go. Is that right? Okay. He then goes in to see the parrot, see if the parrot's all right. Talking to the parrot, in the middle of, him checking out the parrot then calls out, bring us another cup of tea, Rose! And that's what had been going on. And what was nice is he was actually able to sort of tell both spouses that, neither of them were ill. It was purely this parrot asking for tea every couple of minutes. And they both thought the other was senile. So it's a great place. Do go if you're around.
I love that. Because, what initially got you to have a parrot? Was it just a choice thing?
A friend had a parrot, I saw it, I thought this amazing creature, and I went home and got one a few days later. I was in the pet shop, I said, what do I feed it on? They said, oh, chocolate, he loves chocolate. So I fed it chocolate and it died within about a month. So we should never give a parrot chocolate. And I got another one that looked after it properly, and then it's just, they're amazing animals. I don't have it anymore because they get old and grumpy as they sort of go through adolescence and realise that they are parrots and they need other parrots, and I gave them to the sanctuary that I was then.
I think that's a fantastic story. A parrot that doesn't actually just say hello, like a lot of them you see at these places around, a little bit gimmicky, aren't they? A little bit sort of. I love it. It's a great story. I think it's a great time now to probably take some of the questions from the audience. We did receive quite a number of questions. Some of them were a bit on the lines of that we can't really talk about on the embargo thing. We have a selection just here as well, but we'll take some from the floor first.
Let's throw over the floor.
So we could have all fall in. If we could just have a house light maybe change so we can see.
Yes.
And we have a roving mic. I don't know who has it. I can see somebody waving a bit of dark. We just need the house lights.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, we've got points there. So if you have one, let's just throw it over. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Derren.
Hello. What's your name?
My name's Alan.
Alan, nice to meet you.
Yeah. Have you ever been conned? If so, by who? How, why, and have you extracted any form of revenge?
Excellent question, Alan. Yes. Goodness me, yes. If any of you ever go to New York, perhaps on one of these cruises, don't buy any camera equipment anywhere around Times Square. There's a massive rip-off that goes on. You've got Times Square, all the way around it, there's loads of camera shops. It's just like Tottenham Court Road, but it's all sort of camera shops. And they all charge 10, 20 times the price. But because they're all in on it, they know that if you go to another store and say, how much is this thing? And then you think it's all above board. And yes, I went in and spent thousands of dollars on stuff that was terribly bad quality and shouldn't have been anything like it. And was furious about it. not a very interesting answer, but nonetheless, that was it. And timeshare as well. Went to when they ring you up and they say, "Oh, congratulations, you've won a competition." And all you have to do is just come along and listen to a timeshare presentation. It's nothing, and then you win a free gift anyway. And congratulations. So I went along to one of those, and you sit down don't ever go. Do not ever go. So you sit down one-on-one with somebody who's just horrible. This is the worst sort of hardcore salesman, and they just plough you through this. It was just horrendous. And only the fact that I knew what he was doing, that I think stopped me from sort of succumbing. So I was giving him pointers and sort of commenting on his technique just to keep myself out of it. And at the end of it, because you always promised a prize to take home, a free thing that's yours. So I was like, okay, well at least I didn't buy the timeshare, but at least maybe there'll be I wonder what my free gift will be. So you go into this room where they've got a computer, and on the screen there's what is here all the gifts. It's all done at random. You can have a holiday in France. You can have a weekend somewhere over here. You can have a washing machine, a new DVD player, and something rubbish like a Mars bar or something over here, and then and a set of cutlery. And it's done at random. This will be spinning round. It'll stop on any one of the it's the Mars bar, and it was the Mars bar. And everyone's leaving with Mars. I don't know what it was, but it was some stupid thing. But everybody's leaving with those. No one's leaving with washing machine. So don't ever go on one of those. That's my advice.
It's a good question. Before we take another one from the audience,
Terrible answer, but a good question.
We'll plough through some of these as well. But before we come back to you, do we have Anne Francis? Anne Francis, this is her question. Does your power of persuasion work on animals or Paul Daniels? Many thanks, Anne. So Anne, that's Anne's question.
Animals or Paul Daniels?
Animals or Paul Daniels?
Can't comment on the Paul Daniels bit. Animals, I used to, with the parrot, I used to be able to send the parrot to sleep. And this works, and I've done this in the zoo, and I've done this in pet shops. So, what you do is you start you blink at the same rate that they blink, because a nice thing with parrots anyway, with birds, is that rather than sort of making direct eye contact, you sort of slightly dip your head, just because it's a non-aggressive thing. So then they sort of warm to you more. So you dip your head, and sort of look up every now and then that will sort of engage them. And then when they blink, you start blinking. It's classic pacing and blinking. It's something that ties into how people seduce each other and how you persuade people, is you mirror back what they're already doing, and then you start to nudge it in the direction you want them to go in. So a classic thing is you mirror. So if somebody's if you're upset about something and someone goes, "Hey, cheer up," that doesn't really help you. But if they sort of go, "Oh," and they sort of understand, and then they gradually sort of make themselves more and more cheery and bring you slowly with them, then it's a much more effective way of persuading somebody from an unhappy state to a happy state. So the physical avian correlative of this was blinking when the parrot blinks, and you start to kind of, you realise that when you blink, they'll blink back, because you start a pattern with them, and then the more you blink, the more they blink, and then eventually you've got to be nodding your head in that non-aggressive way and doing it, nodding, and they start to do the same, and then they fall asleep and you walk away. And it looks amazing in a pet shop. Do it
to the staff as well.
I haven't tried it with stuff. That probably might work as well. Rabbits as well. If you've got rabbits, you put them on a table or on your lap, and you have to get their head below the level of the rest of their body. So they'll kick for a little bit, but then they. It isn't cruel. It isn't cruel. What are you doing? I'm a rabbit. And then they just sort of go into a kind of a trance state. They just sort of go into absolute nanostasis, and they're just sort of tranced out. And they'll say like that. You can kind of fire guns. They used to do this on stage, like fire guns and things, and the rabbit wouldn't move, and they won't move until you either touch their ears or clap your hands, something very, very close to them. So if you've got a rabbit, that's how you can hypnotise the rabbit.
That's interesting. Good, great question. All right, we'll take another one from the floor then. So I'm sure there's plenty. I'll be guided. It's Steve next. I think Steve's got a question over there.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. You know my voice.
Hi, I'm Marilyn.
Hi, Marilyn.
And all my children are. What I'd like to ask you, if you would be in a film, what type of film would you be in, and what type of role would you play, and what sort of film?
Oh goodness. I was asked on very exciting note, if any of you are comic book fans, that they were going to make, or maybe still are going to make, a film of Doctor Strange, and I was asked by the head of Marvel to at least audition for it. I don't know if it's ever going to happen now, and I don't know if I'm quite ready to do that kind of thing anyway. But I suspect that if I ever did do a film, it probably would be that sort of route. I've touched on sort of acting a couple of times. I find it fascinating because there's a lot of acting in what I do, although it's a very specific sort of thing, and it's very much within my comfort zone as a performer. So the idea of sort of proper acting is something I'm slightly nervous of, or very nervous of, but also find quite intriguing. So I would imagine Doctor Who. I think I should be either Doctor Who or a villain. Thank you. Right into the BBC as well. So yeah, I'd imagine I'd probably get offered something like that, and then if I liked it, maybe take it more seriously. And I did this thing called Crooked House. I don't know if you saw that, which was Martin Gatiss wrote it from the League of Gentlemen. And that was odd because he said to me, "Oh, do you want to have a part in this thing?" And he said, "I don't think there are any lines, but I might write a couple of lines, but I don't think there are." But so I said, "Oh yes, that sounds fun." So I did it. I got to wear a big false nose and long hair and everything. And then and I didn't have a single line in it really. There was sort of a bit of muttering at one point. There were no lines in it. And then it got billed as on their press release. They made a big deal of Derren Brown's first dramatic role, and suddenly I was getting all these phone calls saying, "Oh, so you're breaking into BBC drama," and it was all a bit odd and daunting. And I was just so aware I was going to watch it, be really disappointed because I said nothing at all. So if any of you saw that and were disappointed, I apologise. But it was a good show. It was a good, very good programme.
And that was a great question. How many children have you got?
I have 4.
Four children.
4.
There you go. Great plans.
Oh, thank you very much. That's lovely. And it was slightly creepy as well. The zombie machine one. Thank you. That's one of my favourites too. Lovely. Oh, nice to meet you, children.
Great.
And husband too.
All right, great. We'll take the one
Get them out of here.
from the table. Let me show it at random before we go back to the audience. This one is from Marie Green.
Oh, you can see my bald patch. I have to say, I think my most impressive trick that I've ever done is how I appear with a full head of hair whenever I'm on TV. Look at the screen. Sorry.
She says, "Have the police." I'll use the parrot technique. Keep your eye on me. And sleep. Have the police ever asked you to help with their inquiries, such as psychological profiling? That's from Marie Green on ADEC. I don't know if Marie's here, but have they?
Yes and no. I have had sort of inquiries. My feeling is very strongly that I'm an entertainer and that it isn't appropriate for me to step over that way. And also, the whole point is what I do, in saying magic, suggestion, psychology, misdirection, and showmanship, as I do at the start of many shows, is that it is a mixture of different things. Some of it's real, some of it's not real, and hopefully half of the fun is trying to work out what you're supposed to believe and what you're not supposed to believe. So the idea of being like a psychic and involving yourself when you're dealing with something that's probably completely rubbish, and then involving yourself in real tragedies, I think is just so ugly and horrendous. So I don't even go there. I keep myself very firmly on the entertainment side, and it is horrible because I get letters from people that when people are desperate, then they'll obviously you will clutch at anything when they're desperate. So I get letters from people who are dying, and I'm their last hope, and can I cure them? And it's horrendous. It's a horrendous situation to be in sometimes. So I don't involve myself in anything on that side of the line, and sometimes it can be tricky because you want people to understand and enjoy the sort of ambiguity in it, but understandably sometimes people don't, particularly when they need help.
They're looking for a little bit of hope. And that's only quite natural. People do turn to people who are well known and household names for anything, for the charitable donations. They link them to something, and it's hard to say no, and it's what they are. So it's quite a tricky one. Oh wait, we'll take another question from the floor then. So we'll take one from this side over here.
Hello.
Hello.
Obviously, one of the things that you've never stated is that you have psychic abilities.
Yes.
But a lot of it is reading other people and making suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever considered, or have you ever allowed a psychic to make a prediction and predicted their prediction of you?
But they might predict that, but I was going to predict it.
Well, yes.
Where would I be? I have on occasions, we actually did do a thing, yes, there was something we were going to film in one of the very first things I did. It might have even been the first mind control show, so you obviously think about it. It's an interesting idea. And I went to a psychic training college, which these places exist, and where people go every Wednesday and they sit around and learn and enhance, in inverted commas, their psychic ability. And the idea was I'd go and they'd all, we had a controlled subject who'd come in and none of them knew, and they'd have to go reading him, and then I'd have to go reading him, and then I'd have to go reading all of them and do better than them and win, yes. And ultimately look clever. So that was the idea of it. But it was a really fascinating thing because you realise it's so easy to go that, oh, well, if you don't believe in psychics, as a skeptic, you have to be open to the evidence. Being a cynic is going, no, I don't believe it, it doesn't matter what proof you show me, I'm not interested. Being sceptical is just about being... I personally would love it all to be real, because the reason why I sort of fake those things, if you like, I still have the same love of it being real as probably the believers do, except that I used to like the way I used to take toys apart when I was little. I also like to look at how those things really work. And to me, what happens if you sit down with a psychic and you come away going, that is amazing, she was able to tell me everything about myself. To me, the things that actually create that illusion, if you like, in your head, are far more interesting. Those psychological techniques that have either been used, or the things that you sort of unconsciously used yourself to get to that point of thinking that they know everything about you, that's much more interesting than just saying, oh, it's psychic and supernatural, because when you see it as a psychological process, you realise actually it says things about us as human beings, so ultimately it's just far more interesting than something that's sort of out there. That doesn't relate to us at all. So it's very easy to kind of, if you don't believe in it, just to sort of say, oh, these people are fakes and they're charlatans. I think it can be the case. I think a lot of the very successful psychics that are sort of on TV and making a career out of it, I think, must know what they're doing. But I think there's a much bigger... I should tell you something now because it doesn't matter. I did an interview with a journalist who'd just done an interview with Derren Brown and his wife. Was it Derren Brown? Was Derren Brown married? Doesn't seem like he's married. I think it was Derren. Yes, it was Derren Brown. Who he himself had come from showbiz stock, and I think the person that taught him skills ended up having a bit of a row with him because they were annoyed that he was using it for real, in inverted commas, saying that it was real. And this journalist did an interview with me, and had just come from interviewing these two, and his wife had referred to Aurora's followers as those morons. It was quite telling. And he didn't put it in the interview himself. He was so shocked that they would use that sort of language that he didn't put it in. That's what I'm telling you. So, I think there are some people that are probably out and out fakes. There is a huge area, and I think there's a book in this. I think it's a huge area where we fool ourselves, and we fool ourselves into thinking we're psychic, and we fool ourselves into thinking that psychic people are psychic, because it's just part of, we as human beings, we find patterns. We want to make things fit. You know, if I say to any one of you, it's interesting because you're somebody who. You can be at a party and you can absolutely sort of work the room. You know how to sort of get people to sort of like you. You can be funny, you can be up, and you can make people laugh and you can make people like you. But what's interesting about you is that there'll be moments in that party you'll just suddenly be like, what the hell am I doing here? And you'll just be looking at everybody else sort of enjoying themselves. You'll feel 100 miles away from it. You'll go home, you'll be thinking about, what did that person mean when they say that? And you'll be running conversations through in your mind, and you realise that thing that you put on with people, it's just fake. It's something you've developed. You developed it in a way of basically protecting yourself. And that means that your friends that you make, for example, you tend to really keep people at bay until you have a line, and when you decide that person's going to be your friend, you bring them in under that line, and then suddenly it's like they're in on this inner circle, and if they then upset you or betray you, you feel really hurt by that, but everybody else you keep at bay. It's just a way of, it's control. You've learned to control. And you can say that to anybody, and people go, God, yes, that's amazing. You can see right through me. Whereas I'm saying nothing. There's nothing. I'm just saying you have an extrovert side and an introvert side. You're closer to your friends than people that aren't your friends. It doesn't mean anything, but you say it to people, and we all want to go, yes, God, that's me. So most people getting into psychic ability, as I saw when we went and did this filming, it was a course of people that were coming on every Wednesday, that really wanted to believe in it, and wanted to be able to do it, and they were sitting around and were encouraged to just sort of open up their intuition and say what they felt. So they're around in a circle, and they're saying, this is why we didn't use it yet, because it was just sort of, you couldn't sit and listen to it. You know, they're saying things like, yes, I'm seeing you in on a bus, but the bus is going in the wrong direction. Is that something you can make fit? It might not be a bus, it might be a relationship. And then of course, and then the other part, literally, also, and I promise you I'm not exaggerating, I'm seeing you've, this is to the student who's come in, who's our control subject, so they don't know him, he doesn't know any of them. He's sort of 20-something, looks quite well-travelled, so, you know, long blonde hair, slightly sort of surfery. And I see that maybe you've travelled, and it's in Europe or Africa or the world. And you start to think, well, they're not, these people aren't fakes, they're not con men and women, they really want to believe in it, and they're being encouraged to fool themselves. And that's all fine, it doesn't matter, except when you are dealing with deceased loved ones, and you're dealing with people that are finding it difficult to let go of somebody, and all that horrible tragedy around that, and then you get into the question of, well, is it worth the fact that it could just be a complete lie, and potentially just somebody on stage trampling over people's memories, and somebody on stage kind of knowing exactly what they're doing just for the sake of selling a book, or just for his own ego, or whatever that is. Is it worth it if they take comfort from it? No, I don't know. I don't think there are any easy answers. But we did do some filming with it, and what really struck me then, and also I've been making some documentaries recently, which are going out next year, and I spent a week with a psychic from Liverpool, and it was a very, very interesting week, realising how, at what level I think people can just, even if they know that it's fake, even if they know what they're doing isn't really coming from the other side, can they still sort of believe that it's real? They just don't really question where it's coming from. They just think, well, if I'm saying these things to you and you're taking comfort from it, and that's sort of helping, you say that I'm psychic and I say things in a psychic way, well, maybe that makes me psychic, and that's it. And they don't really look at the questions of, have I actually asked myself, do I know whether this is coming from somewhere else, from outside, or whether I'm just sort of saying stuff and you're making it fit? It's a fascinating area. I think it's actually very complex. So we did do the filming, but all of that just made it sound, you can't edit it down. That's the thing, whenever you see psychics on television, it's edited right down to the hits, to the bits that they get right, because that's what you want to see on television. You don't want to see somebody, no, not really, no. You don't want to see that. So they edit it right down. If you go and see the psychics that do the TV shows, what tends to happen there is that before the show they come out, they talk to the audience, and the audience is full of people that want him to get in touch with someone that they've lost. So he comes out, I can tell you this is how it works, I've seen it, they come out before the filming starts, and they go, okay, is there anybody here who's wanting to get in touch with anybody? 100 hands go up. You say, yes, I lost my son, and he died, and this happened. What does he look like? He looks like this, okay. And what were his interests? Okay, this. Okay, well, if he comes through, I'll let you know. They then start the filming. He comes out, oh, I'm getting a young lad. He's got all the information. That person's in tears because to us it looks like a miracle, but it's just sort of horrible. It's a really long answer, sorry, you got me started off on something there.
So how do you really feel then?
How do I really feel? I find it fascinating because I think the level at which we fool ourselves, the charlatan side of it, where they meet, how you decide what side of the line somebody's on, I think is fascinating. And horrible. I love it.
It is a wide-based sort of thoughts of opinion as well. This one is, it says, my name is Katie Matheson, not me, and I am 14 years old. I'm interested to know whether you have any fears or phobias. I have a particularly odd phobia. I really loved the show last night. Is that your phobia? But there you are. That's Katie Matheson. She's here.
Are you here, Katie?
I think there's a hand. Is there a hand?
You make these people up. They don't exist.
I've got imaginary friends in the audience.
Yes, oh, hello.
Yes, I can see a hand just there. There's Katie.
Hi, Katie. Phobias. Now, I don't like spiders very much, but I'm not really phobic about them. I could not sleep if there was one in the bedroom on the wall or something. Couldn't do that. Phobias are interesting because they are generally what happens with a phobia is that normally when you're little, something happens, like say, you get bitten by a dog, and it's so traumatic that your unconscious responses, which are there to protect you, you blink your eyes if something flies at you, because you don't have to think about it. You don't think, I better blink my eye, or I better move my hand away if I'm touching this hot kettle. It does it unconsciously. Your unconscious mind is there to protect you. And if something happens like that when you're little and it's very traumatic, your unconscious, that deeper gut level part of you, protects you by then making you avoid those things, so that doesn't happen again. But it's an over response, which is actually quite a good response to take your hand away if something's hot, or to blink if something's flying at you. But you don't need to avoid every other dog just because one's bit you when you were little. But because it was so traumatic, that gut level, your unconscious response, it's just sort of over protecting you. It's like using a wheelchair when you only need crutches. So that's what those things come from. And because of that, it's actually very easy to undo a phobia. And what you do, I'll tell you very briefly, if you happen to have the Trick of the Mind book, it's in there, so forgive me if you've already got it. But briefly, what you have to do is you have to dissociate from it. You have to separate yourself from the event. Because what happens naturally is that if you see a dog or a spider or whatever thing is that you're frightened of, whatever Katie's weird thing is that we can all just wonder what that is. Whatever that is, that when you see it or think about it, even if you don't quite remember the event, you instinctively, at that gut level, that unconscious level, you go back to the memory and you go back to all the fear that you felt at the time, and that's what fuels the phobia. So what you have to do is you have to train your brain to not go back into it as something that feels emotionally immediate, but to go back into it as something that feels very sort of, buying jam or something, just sort of very arm's length, where there just isn't any emotional connection with it at all. And the way you do that is you trick the brain into seeing it and thinking about it in the same way that you think about things like buying jam. And if you think about something now that makes you feel really embarrassed, for example, or really frightened, or really, really happy, a memory or something that you've done that gives you very strong feelings, an argument you've had with somebody, or an amazing time you had, you'll find that when you think about it, you're always in the memory, looking out. You're always it's always happening, sort of here and around you. Whereas if you think about the last time you went to buy jam, you'll find a lot of you immediately, you'll probably start to imagine yourself in the picture, sort of from a distance. Am I in Tesco? What am I doing? Or the colours won't be as bright. It doesn't all happen here. It's sort of over there at arm's length somewhere. So you trick the brain by running the phobia memory a few times like that at arm's length. And the easiest way of doing it is you imagine yourself in a room like this. It's like a cinema, and you're at the back of the cinema. And on the screen, they're going to play a very old black and white version of the memory that happened when you were young, getting bitten by the dog, or finding a spider crawling on your face, or whatever it was that triggered it off. But you're going to watch it, but you're going to see yourself in the film, first of all, and it's going to be like a really old, like a silent black and white, maybe slightly sepia tone, that sort of Victorian kind of feel, old-fashioned movie. It's going to be silent, but comedy music's going to play alongside it, all right? And you sit at the back of the cinema, watching this thing, and it's also a very little screen, because that's the other thing. When you picture these things that emotionally detach me, we make the images smaller, so you're telling your brain, by representing it like this, that there isn't anything to feel emotionally strong about. So you have that little screen at the end of the cinema, right down the end there, you're sat up at the back, and you play it through with the funny music, the comedy music, Benny Hill or Monty Python or something. It plays through, and you make sure that you can watch it absolutely comfortably. That's what you're testing. You make sure as it plays like that, absolutely fine. Don't feel any fear about that at all. You're seeing yourself in it, so you're not in it, feeling it like that. You're just seeing yourself at a distance. When you get to the end of it, then, so you freeze frame it at the end. Remember this, because you sit and do it later if you have a phobia. Float down into the film, become yourself in the film. So now you are in it, looking out, but it's at the very end. It's all happened, right? And then you're going to rewind it very, very quickly, and this time in full colour and vibrantly, but backwards. You're going to do it backwards and at high speed. So you take a few seconds to rewind back to the beginning. And if you do that with your eyes closed, when you finish that, open your eyes. And if you try then to get back into how you used to feel about dogs or spiders, you'll find you can't. You've really confused your brain. When it tries to think about it, it sees it in that detached state, and if you try and get into it and sort of be inside it again and feel it emotionally, it's all jumbled up because it was going backwards at high speed. Try it. You'll find so many phobias just can disappear in an instant, things that bond you down for the whole of your life.
Very good, very good. All right, we'll take a little
Pure already. Thank you.
You've got a fear of cruise ships, hopefully, Katie.
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi, what's your name?
Sarah.
Sarah, hello Sarah.
Hi. I work in the film and television industry as a supporting artist, otherwise known as extra. I once had an experience on location for a casualty, and this chap come up to me and said, "Oh, look, Sarah, you work for the BBC, we did this, we did that," and he knew all about what we did. And I was like, "Who the hell is this bloke? I don't know from anybody else." And you must get that every day. How do you feel about people talking to you as though they know you?
Oh, I see, yes. I thought you were saying he was a psychic or something like
No,
that.
no.
That's a really interesting question. I got into what I do through seeing a hypnotist at university, as I said, and then sort of just became something that I really loved doing. And then one day I was offered a chance to do it on TV, and that was lovely because I wouldn't say no to that. And, get out to a wider audience. But I didn't sort of chase the TV side of it, or to be particularly successful. Certainly not to be famous or anything like that. And I think there was that chap Alex who wrote the question during the act about becoming whose band was going to be successful and so on. I think with all those things, it's so important that you just focus on doing what you enjoy and doing it as well as you can, and that the fame, success, whatever, those happen as byproducts if they happen. If you focus on them as ends in themselves, then you just end up going mad because you don't have enough fame or enough money or enough whatever. So they really have to be byproducts. You just focus on what you want to do and doing it as well as possible. So because of that, I've never sort of relished that side of it. But it's lovely. When people are nice, it's always nice if they come up and say, I love the shows, whatever, or that's nice. If they come out and they're sort of like, "Oh, I think your shows are really, really overrated," then it's not as nice. Or sometimes people don't leave you alone, and sort of I've had people follow me into a restaurant and come and sit down, or "Oh, shows a trick, don't bother meeting." "Oh, it's all rubbish, it's all bollocks." That's just annoying. It'd be annoying to anybody, But generally, I think it's one thing you do become aware of is you have to sort of be nice all the time, because you never know, and it's something that if you just might be in a cab. The few times that I just get time to myself to think tends to be when I'm in a cab, and so I tend to not be very chatty when I'm in a cab. Then of course you hear so many, "Oh, I had so and so in the back. He wasn't nice. Oh, he was a lovely guy." And whenever I hear that, I think you've got to be so careful all the time, because you might just be, one time I really don't want to chat, so, "Oh, you so-and-so, yeah, but you're not chatty, or you're a bit bored, or maybe you're actually just in a bit of a loud mood or something, and you go away and that person's met you for 5 minutes, and that's it for the rest of their life. Yeah, I met Derren Brown. Oh, misery, boring." And it's and also because I'm hardly sort of a household name. If you're really, really famous, then I think you just know everyone's going to know who you are, so you can walk around always. I walked into a club with Jonathan Ross. We just had dinner, and he walked in, and he could just go immediately, "Hello," shaking hands with people. If I did that, it'd be ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. So that makes it more difficult, because I go out and shopping and just in my own head a little bit, and then when I leave, and the person certainly maybe says, "Oh, I really enjoy your shows," and I'm like, "Oh God damn, he knew who I am. Was I nice? Was I?" And then, you backtrack. So that's. But what's good about it is that you do learn to actually be nicer. I think you learn the importance of it. You learn that. I feel very strongly that we live in a world of motivational seminars and self-help that teaches us to kind of set your goals. You have to have goals, and then you have to learn how to get there. And everything's about how to persuade people to do what you want so that you can achieve your goals. And I think it's so misjudged, and it's such a selfish approach. I think actually what makes us happiest, and at the same time what tends to get us further ahead, is actually being kind. Being kind to people is such a, I don't say this as like I am Mr. Kind, but being kind makes us happier. if that isn't intuitively true, it's also been shown through empirical research that the things that we think make us happy, getting a new house or getting a new this, make us happy for a bit, and then we very quickly go back to our default level of however miserable or happy we are. But if we're kinder, if we're more altruistic, if we do nice things for people, we never kind of adjust, we kind of keep that. They actually make us happy and we stay happier. And at the same time, you know, people like reciprocating. If we do people's favours, they always want to do us favours back. So it actually also does get you ahead further too. And, you know, we spend most of our life trying to emulate people that we like. You know, they're very clever and witty, so I'll be clever and witty around them. And we forget the fact that we don't particularly warm to other people that are like us, unless they're kind, unless they're nice, unless they're lovely people. So learning the importance of being nice, I'm always feeling like people might be going, oh, what's he like, what's he like, what's he like? It's been a huge lesson for me, which I'm
people can be very judgmental very quickly, can't they, just based on a minor incident?
Absolutely. I was in Bristol once, and I was going into a cafe to meet a friend, and I was in a bit of a rush, and I was late. Oh, was he gone? And I walk into this cafe, and it's sort of glass fronted, and I'm walking in just looking for this guy, and I'm sort of half aware that sort of someone's just sort of held open the door. But I'm sort of, you know, doing that thing of no, I don't have to. And as I walk past, I heard this guy go, "Did you see that?" Typical, yeah. Because I just sort of walked past with my nose in the air. That's how I saw it. And it's horrible. It's horrible because you want to laugh at them and go, "No, sorry, I was just," you know, they're gone. And, oh no, that person's now going away thinking, "Yeah, no, I met him. Ugh, he's a horrible man. Famous for it. He's famous for it. Everybody thinks that."
We've got a great question here before we start to go into our book signing session, which is going to follow very shortly. What would you do, Derren? What would you do if you won the lottery? P.S. Are you really the puppet to Andy Nyman's Evil Genius? Thanks, Kelly and Sarah. I don't have any more requests.
Am I the puppet to Andy Nyman's Evil Genius? Andy Nyman being my co-writer, I mentioned.
Yeah. And what would you do if you won the lottery? If you didn't win the
What do I do if I won the lottery? Make a big fuss about it if it happened any time around now. I'd make sure everybody knew. I'd probably go on a very long cruise. I really enjoyed this. I had no idea what it was going to be like, and when I came on, I heard people do this for 6 months. My God, what must that be like? And I can really see the appeal of it.
see you on a balcony painting.
On a balcony painting, yes. Yeah.
Because these will sell out so quick, you'll think, was it in hand for a second boat? Take a cruise.
Take a cruise, take an easel. I've got an easel, actually, in the show. I could do that. I'd probably go on a very long cruise. And invite you all along.
He's a nice guy, yeah. And open the door for everybody. Well, I'm sure you'll join me and thank you, Derren, for a fascinating insight to the man behind the work, as I said. So, first of all, join me in thanking Derren Brown, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
For those of you who would now like to take advantage, just give us a few moments while we get the table set up for you. You're going to be invited to the stage with your book, that's it, you've already got, to be signed. Okay.